Most people think rudeness is a flaw, something that ruins your reputation, kills relationships, and exposes you as immature. That's only half the story. The other half, the one nobody teaches you, is that rudeness, when used consciously, can become one of the most powerful social weapons you'll ever wield. Because what we label rude is often just honesty that refuses to kneel. It's the moment you stop wrapping your words in bubble wrap to protect someone else's ego. Machiavelli would say most people aren't ready for that kind of power, not because it's evil, but because they lack the discipline to use it strategically. They use rudeness as a reaction, not as a weapon. So first, you need to understand this. There's a massive difference between emotional rudeness and strategic rudeness. Emotional rudeness comes from insecurity. It's the person who snaps because they feel small, ignored, threatened, or powerless. It's the sarcastic outburst, the cheap insult, the loud overreaction. That kind of rudeness doesn't show strength. It shows you can be poked, triggered, and dragged out of your center. It tells the world, you can get to me. Strategic rudeness is the opposite. It's cold, it's intentional, and it's rare. It's when you know silence would be easier, but you choose a sharp, clean sentence instead, not because you lost control, but because you're taking control. You're not trying to hurt someone's feelings. You're resetting the order of the room. You're forcing the other person to update their perception of you. It's the kind of rudeness that makes people step back and think, oh, I can't play with this person the way I thought I could. Machiavelli understood that power is not about being loved. It's about being respected. And often, respect and a little bit of fear come from the same place. The mistake most people make is confusing niceness with morality. Niceness isn't always kindness. A lot of the time, niceness is just fear, submission dressed up in good manners. Machiavelli would tell you that excessive politeness is like an invisible leash. Other people use it to lead you around. The polite one always folds first because they've been trained to keep the peace at any cost. The person who is willing to be seen as rude when it matters has a terrifying kind of freedom. The freedom to say no without padding it with apologies. The freedom to call out a lie without softening it. The freedom to hold a boundary without feeling guilty. Think about how often people use manners to manipulate you. They interrupt you, undermine you, make little jabs, cross your boundaries, but they do it with a smile, in a polite tone. And you hesitate. Not because you didn't notice, but because you don't want to be dramatic or rude. That hesitation, that's the leash tightening around your neck. Machiavelli would smirk and say, politeness is how the weak keep the strong quiet. The moment you start caring more about looking nice than being respected, you hand people your silence. You make them comfortable while they slowly undermine you. But here's the nuance. Real power doesn't come from being rude all the time. It comes from being capable of rudeness and rarely needing to use it. The threat of rudeness becomes the weapon. Imagine someone who is calm, composed, almost never raises their voice. But on the rare occasion they do, the entire room stops. Nobody laughs it off. Nobody brushes past it. Everyone feels the shift. That's Machiavellian. They've built a reputation for self-control, so when they break that calm even slightly, it hits like a shock wave. The key is contrast. Politeness builds the background. Rudeness delivers the impact. Strategic rudeness is communication without decoration. No fluff, no extra sugar on top. It's not yelling, it's not name-calling. It's simply refusing to perform. You answer directly when everyone expects diplomacy. You don't sugarcoat when someone is clearly lying. You don't give fake smiles to people who are actively trying to use you. To them, it feels rude. only because they're used to manipulation disguised as kindness. They're used to people prioritizing comfort over truth. When you speak truth without the usual cushioning, you instantly become less predictable. And unpredictability is a form of power. People start to self-censor around you. They choose their words more carefully. They stop making those little jokes at your expense. They become more cautious, not because you're cruel, but because they don't know how far you're willing to go. There's something Machiavellian in that. The world runs on soft, unspoken rules. Don't say that. Don't call it out. Just let it slide. Those rules protect the people who break boundaries and punish the people who notice. When you break those rules with precision, you create confusion, and confusion creates opportunity. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler should be both a lion and a fox. The lion inspires fear through strength. The fox wins through cunning and timing. Strategic rudeness is both at once strength expressed through cunning. Sometimes you'll look irrational in the moment, but underneath, you're shaping how people perceive you. You're teaching them how far they can and cannot go. Think of a boss who tries too hard to be everyone's friend. They joke with employees, overshare personal details, blur all the lines. At first it feels nice, human, relatable. Then what happens? Discipline fades. Deadlines slip. People stop taking them seriously. Eventually, that same boss blows up, finally snaps, and suddenly, they're the bad guy. Why? Because they never controlled perception from the start. One clear, calculated moment of rudeness early on. A refusal to laugh at a disrespectful joke. A cold look when someone crosses the line. A sharp, "That's not appropriate," would have set the tone without a scene. There's a paradox here. Rudeness only works as power when it's selective. If you're rude to everyone, all the time, you're not powerful. You're exhausting. But if you're measured, calm, articulate most of the time, and then you slice through someone's nonsense with one unfiltered sentence, that moment doesn't register as rude. People call it something else. Authority. Because authority isn't about volume, it's about finality. The Machiavellian master doesn't argue endlessly. They end the conversation. Another trap people fall into is thinking rudeness means rebellion being loud, confrontational, or intentionally offensive. That's not power, that's noise. True strategic rudeness isn't rebellion, it's command. It's the quiet, controlled refusal to flatter, to bend, or to explain yourself when someone is testing you. It's the ability to say no without padding it. It's the ability to say, "You're wasting my time," and let the silence do the real damage. It's the ability to speak one blunt truth that stops manipulation in its tracks. Machiavelli would call this the elegance of dominance. Minimal words, maximum effect. Because raw power doesn't come from talking more. It comes from withholding what people expect you to say. People are addicted to predictable emotional scripts, apologies, excuses, softening, flattery, reassurance. When you break that script, even slightly, it shocks people. They're uncomfortable, but underneath the discomfort is respect. They may not show it, but they feel it. And that's the secret. Rudeness isn't about being unkind. It's about being immune to manipulation. Think about it. Most people avoid being rude because they fear being judged. They fear being disliked. They fear being misunderstood. That fear becomes a leash anyone can pull. You stop enforcing your boundaries. You ignore insults. You tolerate disrespect. You let things slide. You sugarcoat until your honesty loses all shape. But when you stop fearing the label rude, you become untouchable. No one can emotionally blackmail you anymore. No one can force you to apologize for telling the truth. No one can twist your guilt into obedience. And when people sense that shift, everything changes. They start watching what they say around you. They start speaking with more care. They stop assuming you'll just let things go. They adjust themselves to your tone instead of the other way around. It's not that you become cruel. It's that you stop being manipulable. That's why strategic rudeness is a form of emotional armor. It protects your dignity from being chipped away little by little through subtle disrespect. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Politeness has been weaponized against you your whole life. You were taught to be nice, but not to be respected. You were taught to avoid conflict, but not to protect your boundaries. You were taught to keep the peace, even when that peace benefited everyone but you. The polite get punished for honesty. The rude get feared for it. And the irony is, the rude don't even need to be cruel. They just need to be indifferent to approval. That indifference is the root of Machiavellian rudeness. Once you stop chasing approval, your tone sharpens naturally. Your boundaries become hard lines, not suggestions. Your presence becomes more grounded, more solid. Because the moment you need others to like you, you lose leverage. But the moment you can walk away without explaining yourself, you gain it all back. People will call you arrogant for that. But arrogance and power are not the same. Arrogance needs attention. Power doesn't. You don't need to prove you're above anyone. You just need to stop acting like you're beneath them. That's why Machiavelli said, "The wise man must learn not how to be loved, but how to be feared, in the right measure." Fear doesn't always mean terror. Sometimes it means distance, boundaries, respect without intimacy. It means people know your limits are real, not theoretical. And sometimes rudeness, carefully used, is the spark that makes that boundary undeniable. Let's bring this down to everyday life. When someone disrespects you, your first instinct is usually to explain, to argue, to justify your reaction. But Machiavelli would laugh at that. He'd say, "Explanation is the tax the powerless pay." The strong don't explain. They correct once clearly, and then they move on. Imagine someone keeps interrupting you in a conversation. Most people would respond with something soft like, "Sorry, can I finish?" But you're not apologizing for speaking. The Machiavellian response is simple. "I wasn't finished speaking." Direct, sharp, final. To a polite society, that sounds rude. But what it really does is reset the dynamic instantly. People remember it. They adjust next time. Because strategic rudeness is a psychological mirror. It reflects back the disrespect others hoped you wouldn't notice. Suddenly, you stop laughing off uncomfortable jokes. You stop pretending an insult didn't land. You stop softening your sentences to protect someone else's ego. And every time you do that, you reclaim a piece of your authority. Because politeness, at its core, is often used to keep individuals obedient. The group defines what's rude, and whoever controls the definition controls who gets to speak freely. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Those who define what is rude also define what is allowed. But there's a deeper layer to all of this. Rudeness, when mastered, isn't about being cold to others. It's about being loyal to your own truth. You become rude the moment you stop performing. The moment you say exactly what you mean without coating it in 10 layers of diplomacy. The moment you value clarity over approval. Most people avoid that because honesty threatens comfort. They'd rather be fake than be free. But Machiavelli flips the equation. Comfort is the real danger. The person who refuses to be uncomfortable with the truth will always dominate the one who hides behind niceness. That's why you see strategic rudeness everywhere in power structures, CEOs, military leaders, founders, high performers. They're not mean. They're efficient, direct, focused. They can't be manipulated by guilt or emotional theatrics. People don't follow them because they're nice. People follow them because they're certain. And sometimes, rudeness is simply the language of certainty. But here's the catch most people never see. If you want your rudeness to be respected and not resented, it must come from stillness, not from emotion. The rude person who's angry loses just as quickly as the polite person who apologizes. Both reveal dependency. Both reveal insecurity. Both reveal that someone else is pulling their strings. Emotion gives away your center. It exposes that you can be rattled. It shows your power isn't internal, it's reactive. Strategic rudeness is the opposite. It's calm. It's intentional. It's surgical. When you decide to be rude, you pause first. You look someone directly in the eye. You deliver the sentence cleanly, and then you stop talking. It's the silence afterward that does the real damage, not the words. The silence. Machiavelli would remind you, power is perception. The same sentence can sound petty or commanding depending on who says it and how they say it. That's why preparation matters. Build your reputation quietly. Build your composure by habit. Build your restraint as a daily practice. So when the moment comes where you do use a sharp tone or a blunt sentence, it carries weight. People instantly feel the difference because they're not used to hearing that edge from you. If you're always reactive and emotional, nobody takes your rudeness seriously. But if you're usually composed and someone provokes you, and you hit them with a single cold truth, the contrast lands harder than shouting ever could. People start realizing you're not the type who warns twice. There's another benefit that's rarely discussed. Selective rudeness acts as a filter. The people who only liked you when you were endlessly agreeable will suddenly vanish. The ones who can handle your bluntness stay. And the ones who respect your directness rise closer to you. Your life becomes cleaner. Your circle becomes stronger. Your emotional energy stops leaking into fragile ego. Your silence becomes heavier. Your presence grows colder, but in a powerful way. Your reputation begins working for you without you having to say a word. People who used to test you suddenly hesitate. People who once spoke over you now choose their words with care. People who once underestimated you treat you with caution, not fear, but awareness. That's the Machiavellian sweet spot, when people fear disappointing you more than confronting you. But remember this, strategic rudeness is not cruelty. Cruelty humiliates. Cruelty destroys respect. Cruelty creates enemies. Rudeness, on the other hand, realigns. Rudeness establishes boundaries. Rudeness protects respect. Rudeness creates stability. Machiavelli wrote that cruelty, when necessary, must be well used, swift, purposeful, final. The same applies to rudeness. Use it once, use it cleanly, use it intentionally, and then never return to the same battlefield. If you have to repeat your boundaries, they were never real to begin with. The first time you enforce them should be enough. And if someone continues to test you afterwards, you don't argue, you don't plead, you don't explain. You withdraw. Silence becomes your second strike, and it's deadlier than the first. When someone realizes you've stopped engaging, they know they've lost access to your attention. And in Machiavellian terms, that's the ultimate punishment, being cut out of your presence. Understand something essential. Politeness makes you approachable. Selective rudeness makes you powerful. The world respects tension more than harmony. Harmony feels safe. But tension commands attention. Every empire Machiavelli studied, every leader, every strategist, mastered tension. Not hostility, not chaos. Tension. The ability to keep others just slightly uncertain, slightly on edge. Not afraid, just aware your patience has limits. That's the psychology behind respect and fascination. They come from the same source, unpredictability. So next time someone calls you rude, pause. Don't react. Don't defend. Don't explain yourself. Ask, am I actually being rude, or did I just stop obeying? Because most people who call you rude are really saying, you stopped letting me control the interaction. Their discomfort isn't about your tone. It's about losing their leverage. You're not actually being rude. You're reclaiming power word by word, silence by silence, boundary by boundary. That is Machiavelli's Ruthless lesson. The purpose of strategic rudeness is not to dominate others. It's to stop letting them dominate you. It's the refusal to be complicit when someone crosses your line. It's the courage to say the thing everyone else is too scared to say. It's the decision to draw a line so clean, so final, that even your critics can't deny it. And when you start living that way, not cruel, but clear, something shifts inside you. You stop performing. You start existing with precision. You stop trying to be nice. You start being honest. Because the world doesn't need more polite people. It needs more truthful ones. And sometimes the truth wears the face of rudeness. Once you start embodying this kind of unapologetic honesty, something interesting happens. People begin to seek your approval even if they claim to dislike you. They start paying closer attention to your reactions. They test you, challenge you, poke at you, not to bring you down, but to understand where your strength comes from. Because authentic bluntness is rare. Most people are trapped in performance. They smile when they're angry. They agree when they're uncomfortable. They flatter when they want something. When they meet someone who speaks with clean edges instead of soft lies, it creates a strange dual reaction, part threat, part fascination. They will try to provoke you, not out of hostility, but to observe you, to figure out whether your strength is real or just an act. But if you remain unshaken, if your tone stays calm and your face stays steady, they quietly adjust themselves to your energy. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote, "Power must be demonstrated only once. After that, its memory sustains itself." Strategic rudeness is the moment you demonstrate that power, not through shouting or emotional outbursts, but through one precise moment of uncompromising clarity. Your words start carrying weight long after the conversation ends. Your tone echoes in rooms you're not in. Your presence enters the room before you do. People who gossip about you in private will still lower their voice when they say your name, not because they fear you, but because they respect the idea of you. And you didn't achieve this by begging for validation. You achieved it by refusing to beg at all. Now, let's look at how this plays out in different parts of your life. Because strategic rudeness is not just a psychological skill, it's a lifestyle shift. In personal relationships, the person who avoids being rude becomes an emotional hostage. They say yes to things they don't want. They tolerate disrespect disguised as misunderstandings. They allow manipulation to pass because they're afraid of confrontation. And little by little, they lose all leverage. But once you start using rudeness as self-defense, everything rearranges itself. You stop saying, "It's fine," when it's not. You stop smiling at people who drain your energy. You stop giving soft answers to hard disrespects. You stop justifying your boundaries to people who never respected them anyway. And the result is clarity. Your world becomes lighter. Your mind becomes calmer. Your time becomes your own again. Because strategic rudeness isn't aggression, it's economy. It's refusing to waste emotional energy performing diplomacy for people who don't value you. Now, in professional life, this matters even more. The workplace rewards those who can appear confident without groveling. Think about the people who rise the fastest. They're rarely the ones who say yes to everyone. They're not the ones who apologize for existing. They're not the ones who soften every sentence. They're the ones who can say no without hesitation. The ones who call out nonsense without flinching. The ones who speak with fewer words, but each word lands. This isn't cruelty. This is clarity. The workplace is full of actors, people pretending to be confident, pretending to be agreeable, pretending to be supportive. But the person who speaks plainly, directly, without embellishment, that's the person others end up relying on. Not the loud one, not the agreeable one, the certain one. Machiavelli would say that a powerful person is not the one who speaks the most, it's the one who knows when to stop speaking. That's the elegance of authority, brevity that cuts, stillness that intimidates, presence that commands. And once you master strategic rudeness, you actually become more peaceful, because you no longer suppress what you think. You no longer carry the weight of unspoken frustration. You no longer twist yourself into a shape that fits someone else's comfort. Every time you deliver a clean, strategic moment of rudeness, it clears the air like lightning. Short, sharp, purifying. And sure, you may lose some people along the way, but those lost connections were never real to begin with. They were built on illusion, not authenticity. What remains is stronger, clearer, more honest. Now, let's address something deeper. The moral confusion people feel around this idea. They ask, if I become like this, won't I push people away? Won't I become cold? That's the trap. The world teaches you that warmth equals virtue and sharpness equals cruelty. That's how society keeps you obedient. They want you soft, agreeable, apologetic, because soft people are easier to control. Machiavelli would tell you, morality without strength is decoration. Being good means nothing if your goodness can be used against you. Strategic rudeness protects your goodness from exploitation. It's not the opposite of compassion. It's the armor around it. Think of compassion as gold, precious but soft. Without protection, it bends, melts, gets stolen. Rudeness is the metal casing that keeps your humanity intact. The person who can be both gentle and ruthless on command, that person is unstoppable, because when they show kindness, people know it's real. When they give praise, it carries value. When they show affection, it's a choice, not a default. That duality is what Machiavelli called the balance of fear and love. Not one or the other. Both, measured, aligned, real. But to internalize this duality, you have to unlearn your addiction to being understood. Most people spend their whole lives trying to explain themselves, terrified of being misjudged. They worry about labels, rude, harsh, arrogant, cold. But once you understand power, you realize that every label is a leash. The moment you start defending your character, you hand people the ability to define it. Strategic rudeness breaks that leash. It reminds you that misunderstanding is the price of integrity, and it's cheap. People misunderstand you anyway. Might as well be misunderstood for strength instead of weakness. Because here's the truth. When you stop defending your character, your reputation starts defending itself. People will eventually see your patterns. They'll see you're fair. They'll see you're firm. They'll see you're calm, but commanding. Uncompromising, but not cruel. They may not like you immediately, but they'll trust you eventually. And trust built on clarity lasts longer than love built on performance. There's an emotional side to all of this that most people ignore. Rudeness doesn't mean you don't feel emotions. It doesn't mean you're cold or disconnected or numb. It means you don't let emotions dictate your expression. You can be furious and still speak with surgical precision. You can be disappointed and still speak calmly. You can be done with someone and still give a single, final, polite sentence once without bending into apology. Every emotion has its place, but you choose when and how it appears. That's the difference between the ordinary mind and the Machiavellian mind. The ordinary person reacts. The Machiavellian calculates. And sometimes calculation requires a sharp edge. Think of your own life for a moment. How many truths have you swallowed to protect someone else's feelings? How many times have you smiled through disrespect? How many times have you replayed a conversation in your head, wishing you had said what you really meant? Those silent moments of self-betrayal accumulate. They stack up. And eventually, they begin to shrink you. You become quieter, smaller, more hesitant. Your confidence doesn't collapse all at once, it erodes, grain by grain. But when you begin speaking your mind cleanly, honestly, even if it comes across as rude at first, you feel that weight start to lift. You start reclaiming your natural authority. Your posture changes. Your tone changes. Your presence changes. You stop worrying about how your truth will be received and start focusing on whether your truth is necessary. That shift, from emotional to essential, is the birth of personal power. Because the reality is simple. Most people don't deserve your politeness. Politeness is a privilege, not a default. Your politeness should be reserved for people who respect your time, your voice, your boundaries. Not for people who test them. Not for people who drain you. Not for people who rely on your softness to get what they want. When you treat politeness as a privilege instead of a currency, it becomes meaningful. When someone receives your courtesy, they know it's earned, not assumed, not automatic. And that alone creates quiet dominance. You become like a fortress, not hostile, not cold, but selective. Open by choice, not by pressure. Available by decision, not by demand. That is the heart of Machiavellian rudeness. It's not about making others feel small. It's about making yourself untouchable. It's knowing when to close the gate, when to withdraw your warmth, when to let silence speak for you, when to let someone feel the weight of losing access to you. Because here's the truth about human psychology. When people realize not everyone gets access to you, your value multiplies. When people realize you don't respond to every provocation, your power deepens. When people realize your patience has limits, your presence sharpens. Power compounds through controlled scarcity, not through constant availability. The people who mistake this for arrogance were never meant to understand you. They live in a world where being agreeable is survival, but you're not trying to survive anymore. You're trying to command your life with clarity, strength, and deliberate presence. And sometimes command looks like walking away mid-conversation. Sometimes it sounds like saying no without an explanation attached. Sometimes it feels like letting someone think you're rude, when in reality, you're simply finished explaining yourself. That's not rudeness. That's sovereignty. Because when rude becomes a strategy, not a reaction, you become someone others cannot manipulate, cannot pressure, cannot guilt into submission. You speak when you choose. You stay silent when it serves you. You cut through nonsense with a single sentence. You refuse to perform the emotional labor that polite society demands. And here's the most liberating part. You start attracting people who respect clarity, people who respect boundaries, people who value truth over convenience, people who can handle friction and still stay loyal. Your circle becomes smaller but stronger. Your relationships become deeper but cleaner. Your energy becomes sharper but calmer. And the world begins to adjust to you instead of the other way around. That's the final layer of Machiavellian rudeness. When you stop fearing how people perceive your edges, you start living with precision. You stop performing. You stop apologizing. You stop bending. You become direct. real, uncompromising in your truth. Because the world doesn't need more polite people hiding their anger behind forced smiles. It needs more people who are brave enough to be honest, even if that honesty comes wrapped in rudeness. The truth often offends before it frees. But once you learn to deliver it without fear, you stop living under the control of other people's comfort. You stop being polite by default. You start being respected by design. And that is when you stop merely existing in your life and start ruling it.